Rain hammered against the marble steps like bullets fired from heaven. Lightning split the Boston sky at 11:16 p.m., illuminating the iron gates of a mansion that rose from the darkness like a fortress built to keep the world out. The columns gleamed white, almost ghostly. Thunder followed so close it shook the earth. Aria Hartley stood on the front porch, soaking wet, her torn jacket clinging to her ribs like a second skin. Her 6-year-old daughter Emma gripped her leg with both small hands, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. The grocery bag Aria carried was disintegrating, lettuce and apples tumbling toward the rain-slicked stone. She had walked 2 miles through this storm. 2 miles with an address written on a scrap of paper, believing it led to a church shelter, a place that served hot meals and asked no questions. She had believed wrong. The massive oak door swung inward. A man in a black suit appeared first. His name was Rocco. His hand moved toward his waistband with the ease of someone trained to end threats. His eyes were empty of mercy. His face was the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile somewhere around age 12. "Get off the property," he said. Not a suggestion. An order delivered like a blade. Aria's voice cracked before she could stop it. "Please, I just need food for my daughter. I didn't know this was your house." "I'm sorry, we'll go, I just thought." Then the door opened wider. A second figure appeared in the hallway behind Rocco. The light from the chandelier caught him fully, and Aria saw him clearly. Luca Caruso was 6'3" with shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of the entire city. His dark eyes held the kind of coldness that made the rain seem warm by comparison. A scar ran along his jawline like a knife stroke, a permanent reminder of something he had survived. He wore a tailored black shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the kind of chest that belonged to a man who broke other men as a profession. His hands were large and scarred, and on his left wrist sat a watch that probably cost more than everything Aria and Emma had owned combined. He stared down at the shivering child clinging to Aria's leg. His expression shifted. It was subtle. A softening around the eyes that lasted maybe 2 seconds. But Rocco saw it, and his posture changed immediately. The threat that had been radiating from him like heat from a furnace simply evaporated. Emma looked up at the man in the doorway, her small face terrified and pale. "Mommy, I'm cold," she whispered. The words hung in the storm-soaked air like a prayer. Luca Caruso did not speak. He simply stepped aside and gestured them inward with one powerful hand. The movement was graceful, almost gentle. It did not match the man who wore that scar or that watch or that expression of someone who had seen the worst humanity had to offer and decided to become something worse in return. Aria hesitated. Every instinct screamed danger. But Emma was trembling, and the temperature was dropping, and she had nowhere else to go. She stepped inside. The hallway swallowed them whole. Marble floors stretched in every direction. The chandelier cast light like liquid gold. Warmth embraced her like an amnesty. For a moment, Aria simply stood there, dripping onto that pristine floor, acutely aware of how small she was in this space, how visible her poverty was against the backdrop of this extraordinary wealth. Rocco closed the door. The sound echoed like the lid of a coffin being sealed. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 72 hours earlier, when Aria Hartley was counting exactly $34 in crumpled bills under the flickering light of her kitchen, an $85,000 foreclosure notice taped to her apartment door like a death sentence with a 14-day countdown. The kitchen was so small you could stand in the center and touch both walls if you stretched your arms. The light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, buzzing with a sound like something dying slowly. Aria sat at a table that wobbled on 3 legs, arranging bills across the chipped formica surface like tarot cards that would tell her fortune. $1. $5. A crumpled 10. Coins scattered everywhere, pennies mostly, a few quarters she had been saving in a mason jar for Emma's school lunch account. $34 total. She had 14 days to find $85,000 or lose the roof over their heads. The foreclosure notice on the door was printed on official paper, stamped with the kind of authority that could not be negotiated with or reasoned into mercy. She had read it 4 times already. The numbers were burned into her memory like a brand. $85,000. 14 days. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the dying refrigerator in the corner, the one that had stopped cooling food 3 months ago and now served only as a cupboard. Through the paper-thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Chen's television murmuring Spanish soap operas, could hear the neighbor's footsteps overhead, the world moving on while Aria sat at a table with $34 and the growing certainty that she had failed. Emma was asleep in the bedroom, if you could call the closet-sized room with a twin mattress on the floor a bedroom. She had cried herself to sleep an hour ago, confused and frightened by her mother's silence during dinner. Aria had made soup from vegetable scraps and a can of beans. The soup was thin, more salt than substance, but Emma had eaten it without complaint. She was 6 years old and already knew not to complain about food. Aria's phone buzzed on the counter. She did not reach for it immediately because she already knew what it said. Douglas Hale, the hotel manager, always texted at night. His messages came like clockwork, like a curse that arrived every evening at almost exactly 6 o'clock. When she finally looked, she was right. The text read, "Where were you today? I had a double shift opening and you didn't show. You're on thin ice, Aria. This is your 3rd no-show this month." She had not missed work. She had worked the shift, 8 hours on her feet, walking 3 miles to the hotel because her car had broken down again. She had worked the shift and been stiffed on tips by every table except one, a businessman who had left $3 on a $70 check. $3 and an expectation in his eyes that she should be grateful. When she had reported her tips at the end of the shift, the count had been missing a 20. Douglas said she was lying. Douglas said the tips had to have been short when she rang them up. Douglas said he was docking her pay to cover the difference. $3 became negative $17. 34 became 17. She typed back, "I worked the shift. I was there from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. I can provide the clock-in records." The response came in 20 seconds. "I have the records. Your memory is faulty. Or you're stealing. Either way, you're unreliable. We need to have a conversation about your future here. Come in tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Don't be late." Aria set the phone face down on the counter. She looked back at the $34 spread across the table. $34 and 14 days. $34 and a child asleep in the next room. $34 and no car, no savings, no family, no safety net, nothing but the clothes on her back and a kind of exhaustion that had become so familiar it felt like her actual skeleton. The foreclosure notice was taped above the kitchen counter. She had not taken it down. She left it there like a reminder of exactly what she was losing, like she needed the visual confirmation that her life was ending in increments. Rain started outside. It began as a tapping against the window, then became a roar. The apartment had no insulation worth mentioning, so every sound outside seemed to happen inside her ribs. The temperature dropped. Aria sat in her thin cardigan, the same cardigan she had worn 3 winters running, and felt the cold seeping through the walls like a slow poison. The apartment was on the 5th floor of a building in the worst part of Boston. The landlord had stopped maintaining it 2 years ago. The plumbing backed up. The heater worked half the time. The windows were single-pane and drafted air like they were actively trying to freeze her to death. She had paid rent here for 4 years. For years of payments, and the mortgage company had decided the building was worth more empty than occupied. They had filed foreclosure papers on the entire structure. Everyone in the building was being evicted. Everyone was losing their homes. Aria had exactly 14 days to find $85,000 or become homeless. She picked up one of the crumpled bills, a $5 note so worn the corners were soft. This $5 would buy her 2 days of groceries if she was careful. Dried beans. Rice. Eggs if they were on sale. She could stretch that into meals for Emma, maybe even pack lunches for school. But the bills were coming. The electric bill. The water bill. The phone bill that she needed to keep in case there was ever an emergency. Emma needed new shoes. The one she was wearing had a hole in the sole. Aria had sewn the hole closed 3 times, but the stitches kept giving way. The child walked to school with wet socks every time it rained. The school had called twice to ask about her hygiene, suggesting in their gentle way that Aria was not providing adequate care. She was providing everything she had. And it was not enough. The sound of rain intensified. Wind rattled the windows. Aria gathered the $34 and returned it to the envelope where she kept it. She did not count the money again because she already knew every denomination, had already calculated how many days it would last, had already accepted that the math would never work out. She moved to the window and looked out at the storm. The street below was empty except for a man standing under a broken streetlight, his collar turned up against the wind. He looked lost. He looked like someone searching for something he would never find. Aria understood that feeling perfectly. She turned away from the window and walked to the bedroom. Emma was curled under a blanket that had lost most of its stuffing, her face peaceful in the way children's faces became when they were asleep and safe from knowing what tomorrow would bring. Aria knelt beside the mattress and watched her daughter breathe, and in that moment, she made a decision that would later seem inevitable. She found a notebook in the kitchen, the kind with lined pages that cost 99 cents at the discount store. She sat at the wobbling table and began to write. The rain continued to fall against the window like accusations. The notebook sat open on the wobbling kitchen table, and Aria's hand trembled as she held the pen. The lined paper stared back at her like an accusation. Outside, the rain fell in sheets against the window, and the sound of it filled the silence like a living thing, relentless, drowning, merciless. She had started writing at 3:22 in the morning, after the diner closed, after she had counted the money in her apron pocket for the 3rd time that night and confirmed what she already knew. $34. That was everything. $34 stood between her and a complete disappearance. The pen moved across the paper. Her handwriting was shaky, unsteady, the letters tilting like they were falling. I'm going to disappear so you never have to choose between me and your empire. She read the words back to herself and felt something break inside her chest. It was a goodbye letter, though she had not admitted that to herself yet. Not quite. But that was what it was. A goodbye letter written to a man she barely knew, a man she should have been terrified of, a man whose name alone made people in Boston lower their voices and look over their shoulders. Luca Caruso. The Mafia boss. The man who controlled territories and secrets the way other men controlled bank accounts. She did not hear the footsteps approaching the diner at first because the rain was too loud. The thunder was too loud. Everything was too loud except her own breathing, which seemed impossibly quiet, as if she was already becoming the ghost she was trying to be in this letter. The glass door of Morrison's diner swung open at 3:06 in the morning. Rocco entered first, shaking water from his shoulders. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than Aria's rent for 3 months. Behind him came Enzo, identical in build but with a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye down to his jaw like a white lightning bolt. And then came Luca Caruso himself. 6'2", built like a man who had spent his youth doing physical work before his mind became more valuable than his hands. He wore an open white shirt beneath a tailored suit that was probably Italian, probably cost $10,000, probably worth more than everything Aria owned in the world. His hair was dark, silvered at the temples. His eyes were storm gray, the kind of eyes that had seen things that could not be unseen. Rocco walked straight to the back booth where Aria sat hunched over her notebook like she was trying to disappear into the pages themselves. Rocco's face changed when he saw her, but only for a moment. In that moment, something like concern flickered across his features before it vanished again, replaced by the careful blankness of a man who had learned never to show what he felt. "Miss Hartley," Rocco said, and his voice was gentler than a man like him should have been able to make it. "The car on the highway. That was you." Aria looked up. The pen fell from her fingers and rolled across the table. She did not reach for it. Her throat had closed. Standing before her was the most dangerous man in Boston, and he was looking at her like she mattered. Like she was not invisible. The booth creaked as Luca Caruso sat down across from her without being invited. He moved with the kind of deliberate control that came from absolute certainty. He did not ask permission. He did not negotiate. He simply sat, and the weight of his presence filled the small booth like gravity. "Emma," he asked. Aria's mouth opened. No sound came out. How did he know her daughter's name? How did he know anything about her at all? "She's sleeping," Luca continued, his voice deep and solid like an oath. Rocco carried her to a booth near the kitchen. "She is safe. She is warm. She is no longer in danger." Aria's hands were shaking so badly now that she pressed them flat against the table to keep them still. The notebook with the goodbye letter sat between them, and she suddenly became aware of what he was looking at, what he could read if he wanted to. The words about disappearing. About choosing between her and his empire. About a woman who had run out of options and was considering options that had no return. "My driver saw your car on the highway," Luca said. He did not look away from her face. He said there was a woman and a small child in a vehicle that was flooding. "He brought you here because this is where you work. This is where you are known. This is where you have some small amount of safety in a world that has given you none." Aria tried to speak. Her voice came out in pieces, shattered like glass. "Why would you help me? I am nobody. I am just a waitress who—" "Because the people who did this believed you were nobody," Luca interrupted, and something dangerous moved in his eyes. "And that belief needs to be corrected." The clock on the wall behind the counter ticked forward. 3:51, outside, the rain continued to fall. The black and white checkered floor of the diner, the hum of the dying neon open sign, the stale smell of coffee and grease hanging heavy in the silence, everything seemed to sharpen suddenly, to come into focus with an intensity that made Aria's vision blur. "My daughter," Aria whispered. "Is she really?" "She is asking for you," Luca said. "She has been asking since the moment Rocco lifted her from your car. She is afraid of storms, yes?" Aria nodded. Emma had always been afraid of storms. Since she was born, the sound of thunder had made her cry. Aria held her through every storm, which meant Aria had held her through a lot of storms, because Boston was a city that got storms. Luca stood, and the gesture was so simple, so ordinary, that it took Aria a moment to understand it. He was offering her his hand. "Come," he said. "Your daughter needs you to be brave now. Can you do that?" Aria stared at his hand. His fingers were long, his palm wide, his skin bearing the marks of a man who had lived, a small scar along the knuckle of his index finger, a gold ring on his thumb that looked older than the rest of his jewelry, like it had been passed down. She reached out and took his hand. It was warm. It was solid. It felt like the first thing that had held her steady in a very long time. They walked toward the back booth together, Luca's hand never leaving the small of her back. Enzo moved aside without being told, his scarred face unreadable. And when Aria saw Emma curled under Rocco's discarded coat, dry now, safe, her small face peaceful in sleep, something inside her broke and reformed. Something that had been shattered began to put itself back together. But what Aria did not know was that Douglas Hale was already working his phone in the back office, already calling Evelyn Blackwell, already setting in motion the events that would force her into the corner that would lead to the question she would have to answer within 24 hours. A question that would determine whether she lived in invisibility forever or whether she finally became visible to a man who had learned to see people the world had decided to ignore. The diner's neon hum filled the silence like a heartbeat, fluorescent light catching the rain on the windows in stuttering patterns. Aria's notebook lay open in front of her, pen trembling in her hand at 3:22 in the morning. The words stared back at her, her own handwriting shaky and desperate. "I'm going to disappear so you never have to choose between me and your empire." She did not know who she was writing to. The words had simply poured out, as if her exhausted body understood something her mind could not yet grasp. 2 hours before, she had been counting $34 in crumpled bills at this same corner table. $34. That was all she had left. $34 to stretch across for days before the foreclosure notice on her apartment door became real. $85,000 she did not have. 14 days until everything vanished. Her work apron hung soaked against the back of the booth, still damp from the summer downpour that had caught her walking 3 miles home from the morning shift. Emma had been asleep in her arms by the time they reached their building, the little girl's head heavy against Aria's shoulder, her breathing the only sound louder than the rain hammering the sidewalk. The broken-down car on Highway 9 came at 11:24 in the evening. Aria had been driving back from her second job, cleaning offices downtown, a shift that paid $5 an hour under the table, when her 10-year-old Honda simply quit. The engine coughed twice and died. She turned the key again and again, her hand shaking as the rainfall intensified, water beginning to pool around the tires. Emma woke in the back seat, frightened, asking if they were safe. "We're safe, baby," Aria whispered, though she was not safe. She was stranded on a highway with a dead battery and a phone that had no power, wearing shoes that let the rain through, knowing that tow trucks cost money she did not have. That was when the headlights appeared through the storm. A black SUV, massive and gleaming, pulled up behind her. Then another. And another. A convoy of vehicles, sleek and terrifying, their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. Aria's entire body went rigid. She had heard the stories about black SUVs in Boston. Everyone had. She locked the doors and held Emma tighter. The passenger door of the lead vehicle opened. A man stepped out into the downpour. Rocco. Leather jacket soaked instantly, tactical boots splashing in water. His face was scarred, a jagged line running from his left temple down toward his jaw, and when he reached her car window, he tapped the glass with one knuckle, steady and unhurried. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. Rocco gestured for her to roll down the window. She shook her head. He tapped again, patient as a man who had learned the value of patience through violence. "Your car's dead," his voice came through the glass, rough but not unkind. "Storm's getting worse. We can give you a ride." His words were simple. His tone was not a question. "I don't know you," Aria said, her voice barely steady. Rocco glanced back at the convoy, then returned his attention to her through the rain-streaked window. "You're stuck on a flooding road with a kid. Rising water, dead battery, no phone. Your choice, sit here and hope someone else stops, or come with us." He paused, water streaming down his face. "We're not leaving without you either way." It was the honesty of the threat that made her unlock the door. Rocco opened it, rain pouring in, and helped her out with surprising gentleness. He carried Emma, wrapped in the blanket from the back seat, toward the middle SUV. Aria followed, soaked completely now, her uniform clinging to her body, her shoes squelching with every step. Inside the vehicle, leather seats and tinted windows created a world sealed off from the storm. A driver sat behind the wheel. The passenger seat held another man, Enzo, with hard eyes that had seen difficult things, who turned to face her as she climbed in. "Where you headed?" Enzo asked, his voice like gravel. Aria gave the shelter address, the one she had been planning to take them to since the foreclosure notice had arrived. A shelter. A place for women with nothing left. Enzo and the driver exchanged a look. A long one. The kind of look that passed information without words. "That shelter closed last month," Enzo said finally. Aria's face crumbled. She felt the weight of another trap closing. Another door shutting. "There's a diner 2 miles up," Enzo continued. "Morrison's. Open all night. You know it." "I work there," Aria said quietly. "I just left my shift." Enzo studied her for a moment, her wet uniform under her jacket, the child asleep in her arms, the exhaustion carved so deep into her face that it looked permanent. "We'll take you there. Get dry. Figure it out." The convoy moved through the storm, and Aria sat in silence, holding Emma, trying to understand how mercy arrived in black vehicles with men who carried themselves like weapons. She did not know the men's names. She did not know their business. She did not know that in the center vehicle, the one she was not riding in, sat Luca Caruso, who had seen the broken-down car, seen the woman and child in the downpour, and made a single-hand gesture that meant stop and help. She had never seen his face. They arrived at Morrison's diner at 12:14 in the morning. The neon sign flickered against the darkness. Rocco opened the door, handed her two $20 bills, and said simply, "For food." "And a cab." "I can't," Aria began. "You can," Rocco said. He walked back to the SUV. The convoy disappeared into the rain like a dream, leaving her standing under the neon light, $40 in her trembling hand, Emma asking if they were safe now. Inside, the diner smelled like stale coffee and maple syrup and the tired exhaust of 1,000 overnight shifts. Joey, the night cook, looked up from the grill in shock. "Aria? Your shift ended hours ago." "Car broke down," she said. "Can we just sit?" She slid into a corner booth by the window overlooking the parking lot. Joey brought coffee without asking and a grilled cheese for Emma. Aria tried to pay with the $40. Joey waved it off, on the house. She sat across from her daughter, watching Emma eat, watching the rain destroy everything outside the glass. The clock on the wall read 12:20 in the morning. Aria reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, the one she used for grocery lists she could never afford to fill completely. She found a blank page. The overhead light flickered, casting her shadow across the table like a ghost. She began to write, "I'm going to disappear so you never have to choose between me and your empire." The words came faster now, her handwriting growing more frantic. She did not know who the words were for. She only knew that something inside her had shifted the moment those men stopped for her on the highway. Kindness from powerful people always came with a price. It always did. She was still writing at 12:24 in the morning when the door chimes sang. Footsteps. Heavy boots on checkered tile. A voice, low and dangerous and infinitely familiar, "You're in my booth." Aria's head snapped up. Luca Caruso stood 3 feet away, his tailored suit somehow perfectly dry despite the storm, his dark hair slicked back, his eyes, storm gray and penetrating, fixed on her face. Rocco and Enzo flanked him like shadows. Behind them, Joey had frozen behind the counter. Aria recognized him instantly. Not from seeing him before, but from the way the air itself seemed to hold its breath around him. This was power standing 3 feet away in human form. She stood quickly, fumbling with her notebook. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. We can move." "Sit," Luca said. Not a request. Aria Saturday. Her hands trembled against the table. Luca slid into the booth across from her in one fluid motion, his movements controlled and precise. He gestured toward Emma with one hand. "Your daughter?" "Yes." Aria's protective hand found Emma's shoulder. "Her name is Emma. She's 5. Luca's gaze moved from Emma to the notebook in Aria's hands, and recognition flickered across his features. "You were on Highway 9. The broken car. Your men helped us." Aria's voice came out barely a whisper. "I don't know how to thank them." "Or you." "How did you?" "Rocco reported it," Luca said simply. He leaned back against the vinyl booth, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Where's home?" Aria's throat tightened. She could feel the weight of all her shame gathering behind her eyes, preparing to spill out. "Don't have one. 14 days until eviction. $85,000 I don't have. The bank, the medical bills from when she was born, I tried, I work doubles, She stopped, pressing her palms against her eyes. "Why do you care?" Luca's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. "My men pulled you off that highway. I want to know if that was worth it." Aria stared at him, searching his face for cruelty, finding only cold assessment. "I'm nobody. I'm a waitress who can't pay rent. You wasted your time." Luca glanced at Rocco, who shifted uncomfortably, his scarred face revealing something that looked like concern. In 15 years of working for Luca Caruso, Rocco had never seen him sit with a stranger like this. Never seen him ask questions. Never seen him offer help without expecting servitude in return. "You have family?" Luca asked Aria. "No. Parents died when I was 19. Emma's father left before she was born." Aria's hands folded into fists. "It's just been us. It's always been just us." Luca's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A shadow crossed his face, brief, dark, and carefully controlled. He understood alone. He understood what it meant to have the people closest to you become the people most willing to betray you. His own brother Vincent had sold their entire operation to the Mocchetti family 6 years ago, a betrayal that had cost 37 lives and left Luca in charge of an empire built on blood and survival instead of joy. He had chosen power over mercy, and it had cost him everything soft. The door chimes sang again. Aria's face went white. Douglas Hale walked in, his manager's lanyard swinging from his neck, his face already twisted with anger. Behind him, moving with the authority of ownership, came Evelyn Blackwell. Late 50s. Platinum hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to erase all softness from her features. Designer coat in cream wool that cost more than Aria earned in 3 months. Cold eyes that had never looked at anyone with anything approaching kindness. Douglas spotted Aria and his expression darkened further. He strode toward the booth, his voice loud enough to make Joey flinch. "Aria, what the hell? I called you 4 times. You're scheduled for the breakfast shift in 6 hours." "I didn't agree to that," Aria said quietly. "I worked a double already." Evelyn's voice cut across her like a blade. "You work when we tell you. Or you're done." She noticed Luca, and her entire body stiffened. Recognition flooded her face, followed immediately by fear. "Mr. Caruso. I didn't realize you frequented our establishment." Luca did not stand. Did not acknowledge her beyond a glance so cold that the temperature in the diner seemed to drop. Evelyn's confidence wavered. "There's no need for." Douglas, oblivious to everything but his own irritation, grabbed Aria's arm. "You're coming back to count inventory. Now." Aria pulled away. "Let go." Douglas tightened his grip, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to leave marks. "Let go," Aria said again, louder now. The temperature in the diner dropped further. Rocco moved from the door, a blur of motion so fast that Douglas barely had time to register what was happening. Rocco's hand closed on Douglas's wrist like a vice, immobilizing it completely. Douglas yelped, releasing Aria immediately, stumbling backward. Rocco did not speak. He simply stared at Douglas with eyes that promised violence if he moved again. Evelyn's voice shook. "There's no need for." Luca finally looked up at her, his gaze flat and empty as a predator's. "You're still here," he said. 2 words, nothing more. But they carried the weight of an entire organization behind them. Evelyn went pale. She grabbed Douglas's arm and pulled him toward the door. Douglas sputtered protests, but she dragged him out into the rain. The door chimes sang as they disappeared. Silence swallowed the diner. Aria sat down slowly, trembling from the shock of it all, from the sudden realization that she had just seen real power move. Luca had not raised his voice. Had not made a threat. Had simply existed, and everything had bent around him. "You didn't have to," Aria began. "Yes, I did," Luca said. He stood, and in one smooth motion, pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. He placed it on the table in front of her. Just a phone number. No name. No explanation. "You need 85,000, he said. "Call that number." Aria stared at the card, her mind refusing to process what was happening. "I can't pay you back." Luca's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. "I didn't ask you to." He walked toward the door, Rocco and Enzo following. At the threshold, he paused. He looked back at Aria, and for just a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face, something that looked like recognition. "Your daughter's name?" he asked. "Emma," Aria whispered. Luca nodded once, then disappeared into the rain. Aria sat alone in the booth, the business card in her shaking hand, Emma drowsy against her shoulder, the notebook with her half-written letter still open on the table. Outside, the storm raged on. She did not call the number that night. The rain hammered against the brownstone windows like 1,000 angry fists. Inside the study, Aria stood trembling, her hand still gripping Emma's small fingers from the hallway beyond. Luca Caruso sat motionless behind the desk, his dark eyes reflecting nothing but calculation, his tailored charcoal suit pristine despite the late hour, the scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone catching the lamplight as he tilted his head slightly. "Sit," he said. Aria Saturday. The leather chair absorbed her weight like she was nothing. Outside, thunder cracked the sky open. "Douglas Hale has stolen from his employer for 3 years, Luca said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. $850 this week. Thousands before that. You saw him take it. You have no proof. He filed a false police report naming you as the thief. The Boston Police Department received that report at 4:37 this morning." Aria's breath came shallow. "How did you?" "I know everything that happens in this city within 10 minutes of it happening," he said. "Rocco pulled the police files 30 minutes ago. Douglas Hale's bank account shows regular deposits from Morrison's diner that do not match his salary. His landlord's records show he pays rent in cash. Expensive cash. The kind of cash that comes from skimming tips meant for waitresses who count $34 in their wallets and wonder how they will feed their children." The specificity of it struck her like a blade. He knew. He knew about the $34 because she had told him nothing, and yet somehow he knew everything. "Your daughter's name is Emma," Luca continued. "She is 6 years old. She was born in a shelter because you had nowhere else to go. Her father abandoned you before she was born. Your parents died in a car accident when you were 19 years old. You have no siblings. No family. No one to catch you when you fall." Aria's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Luca said, standing, walking to the window where rain streaked the glass, "people like Douglas Hale and Evelyn Blackwell believe they can destroy people like you because they think you have no one. They think you are invisible. They think your life matters less than the money in their pockets." He turned to face her. In the stormlight, he looked like something carved from stone, something that could crush her with a single motion and feel nothing. "I am about to show them how wrong they are." His phone was already in his hand. He dialed. The call connected after one ring. "Rocco. Execute the federal tip. Full documentation. Bank records, offshore accounts, the hotel payroll skimming, everything. Send it to the Boston FBI field office. Tell them the Hale Blackwell theft ring is ready for pickup." He paused, listening. "No. This is a gift. Tell them it came from a concerned citizen. Hang up after you've confirmed delivery. Do not answer if they call back." He ended the call. Looked at Aria. "It is done," he said. 3 miles away, in a glass and steel office on the 34th floor of the Morrison Hotel, Evelyn Blackwell sat across from Douglas Hale, a crystal tumbler of whiskey catching the city lights. Evelyn was 58 years old but looked 40, her face tight with expensive surgeries, her platinum hair swept back to show diamond earrings worth more than Aria's car had been. She wore a dress that cost $7,000, and she wore it like armor. "Once she is arrested, no one will hire her," Evelyn said, her voice smooth as venom. "She will lose custody. The child will go into the system. We keep the tips we skim. We file a report that she stole from us. Insurance covers our losses. We move forward." Douglas grinned. He was 42, soft around the middle, with the confident smile of a man who had never faced consequences. "The police report goes live today. She'll be picked up by this afternoon. By tomorrow, she is gone. They clinked glasses. The whiskey caught the light like liquid amber. The office door opened. 12 federal agents in black tactical gear moved like wolves, like a precision machine that had been waiting for this moment. Their badges hung on chains. Their weapons hung at their sides. The lead agent, a woman with grey streaking her dark hair and a scar on her neck, stepped directly to Evelyn's desk. "Evelyn Blackwell, Douglas Hale, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and labor trafficking." Evelyn's glass shattered on the hardwood floor. Amber whiskey spread like blood. "There is some mistake," she said, but her voice had changed. It was thin now, paper thin, like it might tear apart at any moment. "I am a respected business owner. I have connections. I have lawyers." "I have?" "You have the right to remain silent," the agent said, and snapped the handcuffs shut around Evelyn's wrists with a click that sounded like a coffin lid closing. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Douglas stood. His knees buckled immediately. He sat back down. "No. No, I didn't, I would never," he stammered, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold them still. "I made a mistake. I can fix this. I can testify. I can give you names." "I can?" The second agent pulled him to his feet with one hand and wrenched his arm behind his back. Douglas cried out. The handcuffs bit into his wrists. "You have the right to an attorney," the agent continued. "If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. Do you understand your rights?" "This is a mistake," Evelyn screamed as they dragged her toward the door. "I will own you. I will destroy you. I will." The sound of her voice cut off as they pushed her into the hallway. Douglas wept openly, his body convulsing with sobs, mucus and tears running down his face. He looked like a child. He looked like someone who had never been told no in his entire life and could not comprehend that no was even possible. They dragged him out through the hotel lobby. Guests stared. Staff pulled out their phones. The cameras started flashing, not FBI cameras, but civilian cameras, the kind that upload directly to the internet, the kind that go viral in minutes. By the time Evelyn and Douglas reached the federal vehicles outside, 200 people had filmed their arrest. By the time the vehicles pulled into traffic, those videos were already spreading across the internet. 5,000 views. 10,000. By noon, 500,000 people would watch Evelyn Blackwell screaming and cursing as federal agents placed her in the back of a black sedan. By evening, every major news outlet in Boston would be running the story. Across the street, in a tinted SUV parked in shadow, Luca Caruso watched the federal vehicles pull away. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, the kind of rain that falls after a storm has exhausted itself. Rocco sat in the driver's seat, engine idling, windshield wipers moving in steady rhythm. In the back, Enzo held a newspaper even though he was not reading it. The silence inside the SUV was profound. "Death would have been faster," Rocco said quietly. "Yes," Luca replied. "Too fast. Too merciful. This is better. Federal prison. 40 years minimum. Every asset seized. The hotel will be liquidated to pay restitution to the workers they stole from. Douglas Hale will spend the rest of his life in a cell, knowing every single day that he could have made one different choice and avoided all of this. That is the punishment that matters." Enzo lowered his newspaper. "And the girl?" "Hartley?" "The foreclosure is paid," Luca said. "The false police report will be dropped when the real investigation begins. By tomorrow, she will understand that her life has changed." The SUV pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic, disappearing into the rain-slicked streets of Boston like a ghost that had never been there at all. Back at the brownstone in Beacon Hill, Emma sat at the kitchen table eating pasta that Enzo had prepared, her small feet swinging under the chair, her focus entirely on her bowl. She did not understand that her world had just shifted on its axis. Children never do. They simply exist in the moment, moving forward into the next thing with the remarkable resilience of the very young. Aria stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching her daughter eat, her hand still holding the business card with just a phone number on it. She thought about the notebook letter she had written at 3 in the morning, the one where she had promised to disappear so Emma could have a better life. She thought about how close she had come to leaving. Luca appeared in the hallway behind her. She did not hear him enter. He moved like smoke, like something that did not fully belong to the physical world. "Your daughter has finished her meal," he said. "Enzo has prepared a room for her. There is a bed with clean sheets. There is a window that looks out onto a garden. The rain has stopped, and in the morning, there will be sunlight." Aria turned to face him. In the soft light of the brownstone, Luca Caruso looked different than he had in the diner. He looked older. He looked like someone who carried the weight of an entire city on his shoulders and had long ago accepted that the weight would never be lifted. "Why did you do this?" she asked. "Why did you help me? You do not know me." For a moment, Luca said nothing. The sound of rain dripping from the gutters echoed through the hallway. "Because," he said finally, "I have lost everything that matters. I know what that looks like. I know what it feels like to stand at the edge of nothing with no one to catch you when you fall. I will not allow it to happen to you. Not while I have the power to prevent it." He paused. His dark eyes held hers. "Sleep here tonight. Tomorrow, we will discuss what comes next. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think." The notebook sat open on the desk in Luca's study, and the word stared back at her like a confession that should have stayed buried. Aria stood frozen in the doorway, her hand trembling against the doorframe, watching the man she had loved for exactly 2 weeks read the letter she had written the night before everything changed. His face was stone. His knuckles were white where he gripped the page. And in that silence, a silence so complete it swallowed even the sound of the city 12 stories below, Aria understood that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. "But we need to go back. We need to understand how a woman who owned nothing but a child and a prayer could end up here, in a brownstone that cost more than she would earn in 50 years, watched over by men who answered to only one name. We need to remember the rain. We need to remember what desperation looks like when it has nowhere left to run." 2 weeks earlier. The diner on Commonwealth Avenue, the kind of place that exists in the margins of the city, where the fluorescent lights hummed like dying insects and the coffee had been brewing since morning. Aria Hartley stood at the register, her fingers moving through the motions of taking payment, but her mind was elsewhere, calculating, always calculating. $34 and change in her apron pocket. Emma needed new shoes. The electric bill was due in 5 days. The foreclosure notice taped to her apartment door gave her 14 days. 14 days to produce $85,000 or watch everything vanish. She was 28 years old but looked older. Her hair, once chestnut brown, had faded to a dull tan from stress and poor nutrition. Her eyes were grey-blue and hollow, the kind of hollow that comes from counting money for survival instead of dreaming about tomorrow. She wore the diner uniform, a white polyester dress that had yellowed at the collar and a name tag that had been worn so long the letters were barely visible. Her hands were calloused from 7 years of this work, from scrubbing tables and carrying plates that cost more than the tips she received for serving them. The rain outside was biblical. It had started at 5 in the afternoon and had not stopped for 3 hours. Water streamed down the windows in sheets, and the street beyond looked like a river. Aria kept glancing toward the kitchen where her manager, Douglas Hale, was preparing orders he had demanded she stay late to help serve. Douglas was a man of 53 with the kind of soft belly that comes from sampling the kitchen too often and the kind of cold eyes that came from years of squeezing people harder than they could bear. His business partner, Evelyn Blackwell, had arrived an hour ago. Evelyn was 61 and owned the hotel where Aria worked as both waitress and occasional maid. She was the kind of woman who believed poverty was a character flaw, something people deserved, and her contempt for Aria was constant and creative. At 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, unable to face another day of the calculation, Aria had written in the notebook she had purchased at a dollar store. 2 pages of shaky handwriting. The first line had haunted her since, "I'm going to disappear so you never have to choose between me and your empire." She had written about Emma, about how the child deserved a chance at life that did not include a mother drowning in debt, how sometimes the kindest thing a parent could do was step out of their child's way and let someone else give them what they could not. She had never finished the letter. She had never intended to. But it was at 3:42 in the morning, when she finally closed the notebook and stuffed it into her purse, that everything changed. The black SUV broke down on the highway. Not hers. She couldn't afford a car that broke down. She couldn't afford a car at all. She had borrowed her downstairs neighbor's vehicle, promising to return it by dawn. Emma was asleep in the back seat, her small body curled against the window, her breathing steady and even. Aria had been driving home from the diner when the engine made a sound like a dying animal, and suddenly she was coasting onto the shoulder, watching the road ahead disappear into rain so thick it looked solid. She didn't panic. Panic was a luxury for people with options. Instead, she sat in the driver's seat, her hands gripping the wheel, thinking about how she was going to explain this to her neighbor, how she was going to get home, how she was going to get Emma to school in the morning. The rain drummed against the roof like fingers tapping, 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 insistent and endless. That was when the headlights appeared. For black SUVs, moving in formation through the storm. Military precision. The kind of organized power that doesn't need to announce itself. The convoy pulled over without hesitation, blocking her car front and back, and Aria's breath caught because she had seen enough movies, lived in enough danger, to understand that this was not a rescue. This was something else. The rear passenger door of the middle SUV opened. The man who stepped out moved like something that had learned to walk but had never quite accepted the limitations of physical form. He was tall, at least 6'3", with shoulders that seemed to occupy an entire section of the highway. He wore a charcoal cashmere coat that probably cost more than Aria's rent, though rent was no longer a concept that applied to her situation. His hair was dark, nearly black, shot through with silver at the temples. His face was carved from something harder than bone, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it could shatter steel, and eyes so dark they looked like storm clouds. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, pale and thin, like someone had tried to cut his face open and had almost succeeded. He moved to her window without rushing. Without fear. Without any concern for whether she might have a weapon or a reason to use it. Aria rolled down the window halfway. The rain immediately soaked her hair, her shoulder, the fabric of her dress. "The vehicle is broken," the man said. His voice was deep and precise, each word placed like a stone in a deliberate pattern. "You have a child in the back seat. The temperature will drop to 42 degrees by morning. You will need shelter." Aria couldn't speak. Her mouth had forgotten how to form words. The man's dark eyes moved from her face to Emma's sleeping form and back again. Something shifted in his expression, barely visible, like ice cracking beneath snow. "My name is Luca Caruso. My driver will take you and your daughter to the diner where you work. Your manager is there. You will be safe." He turned and walked back to the SUV. The convoy began to move. Within seconds, it had merged back into traffic, vanishing into the rain like it had never been there at all. Aria sat alone in the broken-down car, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't grip the wheel. She knew that name. Every person in Boston knew that name. Luca Caruso was the kind of man that mothers warned their children about, not because he dealt in drugs or violence, though he presumably did both, but because he was the kind of powerful that existed outside normal rules. The kind of man who didn't disappear people. The kind of man who made other people disappear, and everyone forgot it had ever happened. She didn't have a choice. She gathered Emma in her arms, the child still half asleep and confused, and climbed into the black SUV that had pulled up behind her neighbor's broken car. The driver, a silent man with a neck like a tree trunk, drove through the rain without speaking. Emma fell back asleep against Aria's shoulder. Aria stared out at the streaming windows and wondered if she had just made a deal with something that wore a human face. The diner was still open when they arrived. The fluorescent lights burned behind the windows like prison yard searchlights. Through the glass, Aria could see Douglas at a corner table with Evelyn, their heads bent together in conversation that looked like conspiracy. The driver opened the door for her, and Aria stepped out into the rain, still holding Emma against her hip, the child's weight solid and real and the only thing that felt like it belonged to her anymore. "The man who stopped for you asked that you be safe," the driver said. His accent was thick Italian, his words measured. "You work here, yes?" Aria nodded, unable to speak. "Then you are safe here," he said. "For now." He drove away before she could respond. The rain closed around the diner again, and Aria was left standing on the sidewalk with her sleeping daughter, the broken car 3 miles away, and the certainty that something had shifted in the universe in a way that could not be shifted back. Douglas saw her enter. His face darkened with anger, not concern, not relief that she had returned, but the specific fury of a man who believed he owned her time and resented when she was late. He stood up from the table with Evelyn, his bulk moving through the diner like a tide. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I called you 3 times. The evening shift needed." "My car broke down," Aria said quietly. She set Emma down gently in a booth, tucking the child against the window. "I'm here now." "You're here now," Douglas repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're here now, soaking wet, holding up the diner, when I have paid customers waiting. Evelyn and I were just discussing some matters regarding the tips you reported last week." Evelyn approached with the kind of smile that belonged on a shark. She was dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Aria made in a month. Her hair was silver and perfect. Her nails were long and painted a shade of red that looked like blood. "We've been doing an audit," Evelyn said, her voice smooth as silk over razor blades. "Checking the numbers against what you've reported. It seems there's a significant discrepancy. Money missing from registers. Money you were responsible for." The world tilted. Aria's hands went numb. "I didn't take anything," she said. Her voice sounded very small in the diner. "Of course you didn't," Evelyn said, in the tone of someone speaking to a child who had just claimed to see Santa Claus. "But you reported more tips than we have record of. That's either theft or incompetence. Either way, we're going to have to let you go. Effective immediately." The diner tilted again. Aria gripped the booth's edge to keep from falling. She had no response. She had no words. She had no mechanism inside her that could process losing this job, this terrible, exhausting, barely survival job, because the alternative was having absolutely nothing. She looked at Emma, still asleep in the booth, her small face peaceful in a way that Aria's face hadn't been in months. "You have 1 week to clear your belongings," Douglas said. "After that, you don't come back here. And between me and Evelyn, you won't find work at any restaurant in this city. You understand me?" Aria understood. She understood perfectly. She understood that she had just lost the last thread holding her life together. She understood that the foreclosure notice on her apartment door suddenly felt like a luxury compared to what was coming. The diner door chimed. 3 men entered, their suits immaculate, their movements coordinated in a way that suggested military training. The first man was tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar on his face and eyes that looked like a storm gathering. Luca Caruso. Behind him came 2 other men, one with a boxer's build and the other with the kind of quiet lethality that only came from years of violence. The diner went silent. Douglas paled. Evelyn's smile froze on her face like a photograph of itself. "Aria Hartley," Luca said. His voice carried across the diner, over the hum of the refrigerator and the rain against the windows. "I would like to speak with you." Aria couldn't move. She was trapped between the nightmare in front of her, the job loss, the eviction, the 14 days ticking down, and this thing walking toward her that might be worse. Luca stopped beside the booth where Emma slept. He looked down at the child, and something in his face changed. It was subtle, just a shift in the set of his jaw, a softening around his eyes, but it was enough to tell Aria that he was seeing Emma, really seeing her, and that the child had somehow triggered something in him that the rest of the world had never managed to access. "She's beautiful," he said. It was not a compliment. It was an observation, the way a general might observe a piece on a battlefield. How old? 7, Aria whispered. Luca's eyes moved to Aria's face. You have been crying. No, Aria said. But her voice broke on the word. Yes, Luca said. It was not cruel. It was simple fact. You have been crying for a very long time. I can see it in your eyes. He turned to Douglas and Evelyn. This woman is no longer employed here, yes? Douglas hesitated. Evelyn's face had gone white. I asked you a question, Luca said. His voice remained calm, but something in the tone suggested that the consequences for lying would be severe. Yes, Douglas managed. She's terminated. Effective immediately. Luca nodded slowly. Then you have committed fraud. You have accused her of theft to justify termination. You have done this because you believe she is alone, powerless, someone no one will advocate for. He paused. You were wrong about that last part. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. He set it on the table in front of Aria. The card was black with silver lettering. A single phone number. You will call this number when you are ready, he said. I will help you. Your daughter will have what she needs. You will have what you need. The people who did this will learn that there are consequences for preying on people they believe are powerless. He turned and walked out of the diner. His men followed. The rain swallowed them. Douglas and Evelyn stood frozen, as if the air had suddenly gone thick and they were trapped inside it. Aria looked down at the business card. Just a number. Just that. But it felt like a life raft being thrown to someone drowning in the dark. Emma stirred in the booth, her eyes opening slowly. She looked up at Aria with the clarity that children sometimes possess, seeing past the surface of things. Mommy, she said. Are we going to be okay? Aria picked up her daughter and held her close. The diner smelled like old coffee and regret. The rain hammered against the windows with a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat. Yes, Aria said. We're going to be okay. She held the business card in her trembling hand and wondered if she had just made a prayer, or if she had just made a deal with darkness itself. What she did not understand yet was that sometimes they were the same thing. 6 months later, the notebook sat open on the desk in Luca's study, and everything had changed. The apartment Aria lived in now had windows that overlooked the city. Real windows, with working locks and heat that came through actual vents instead of radiators that clanked through the night. Emma's room had a real bed, a twin with white sheets and a comforter covered in stars. Her shoes, the tiny pink ones from the shelter, sat in a memory box on the shelf. Emma no longer needed them. Emma's feet had grown. Emma was thriving. Aria worked at a restaurant 3 miles away, promoted now to assistant manager after the previous manager had quit following a very quiet conversation with Rocco and Enzo. She made triple what she had earned at the diner. The foreclosure had been paid in full. The apartment was hers. The future, which had looked like a brick wall at the end of a dark hallway, now looked like it might actually contain possibilities. Douglas Hale and Evelyn Blackwell were both in federal prison. The investigation had uncovered years of labor violations, wage theft, and a network of exploitation that stretched across 12 properties in Boston. Aria had testified. She had been asked to describe what had happened in the diner. She had told the truth. And the truth had been enough. What remained was the notebook. The letter she had written at 3 in the morning, when she thought the only option left was to step out of Emma's way and let someone else give her child what she couldn't. She had carried it with her every day since that night. She had never finished it. But she had also never thrown it away. She took it out on a Tuesday evening, after Emma was asleep, and left it open on Luca's desk in the study of the brownstone where she and her daughter now stayed 3 nights a week. She didn't think about what would happen if he read it. She didn't allow herself to think about the letter at all. She just left it there, like leaving a confession in a church. Then she walked out to find Enzo reading to Emma in the next room, his gruff voice softening over words like once upon a time and a happy ending. The sight of it made something in her chest crack open, not with pain, but with the possibility of healing. 20 minutes later, Rocco appeared in the doorway. His face was strange, the way someone's face gets when they have just experienced something they couldn't quite process. "Boss is in the study," he said quietly. "He wants to see you." Aria's heart moved into her throat. She kissed Emma's forehead, told Enzo she'd be right back, and walked down the hallway that suddenly felt very long. Luca was standing at the window, the notebook still in his hands. The study was dark except for the city lights bleeding through the glass. His shoulders were tense, his jaw working like he was grinding something between his teeth. "You were going to leave," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel being poured into a hollow space. Aria couldn't lie. Lying would have been its own kind of death. "Yes," she said. "I was going to disappear. So you wouldn't have to choose." "Choose what?" He turned to face her. In the dim light, his scar looked even more pronounced, cutting his face in half like a wound that had healed but never quite closed. "Between me and your world," Aria said. The words came out in a whisper. "I've seen the news. I know what you are. I know what loving you means. And I couldn't let Emma grow up in that. I couldn't be the reason you had to explain to your men why you were protecting a waitress and her daughter instead of running your empire." Luca crossed the room in 3 steps. He set the notebook on the desk with careful precision, like it might shatter if he wasn't gentle. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. "My brother betrayed me 15 years ago," he said. "Sold everything we had built to our enemies. I had to choose between mercy and survival. I chose survival. I killed him myself. Do you understand what that means?" Aria shook her head. "It means I know what loss looks like," Luca said. "It means I know what it means to carry something that should destroy you but somehow doesn't. It means that when I saw you in the rain with your daughter, something in me that I thought was dead woke up again." He stepped closer. "You don't understand what you are, Aria. You think you are nobody. You think you are a burden. But you are the reason I came back to the study tonight instead of going to the Mocchetti meeting. You are the reason Rocco has learned to smile. You are the reason Enzo reads children's stories out loud to a 7-year-old girl like it is the most important thing he has ever done." Aria felt tears on her face but couldn't remember when she had started crying. "I'm scared," she said. "Good," Luca said. "So am I." He moved closer until she could see the texture of the scar on his face, the exact shade of his eyes, the way his chest rose and fell. Then he reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm. His grip was gentle. It was the gentlest thing she had ever felt. "You don't have to choose either," he said. "And you don't have to disappear. You just have to stay. Can you stay?" Aria looked at his face, scarred, powerful, dangerous, and somehow achingly human. She thought about Emma asleep in the next room, about the shoes in the memory box, about the apartment with windows that actually opened. She thought about the letter she had written when she thought she had nothing left. She thought about what she had found instead. "Yes," she said. "I can stay." Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one, and the rain, which had never really stopped in Aria's life until now, finally began to clear. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.